Hi guys, the Builder Investor here again. And today I'm going to show you a few little tips of basically what to look for when doing a viewing on a property. Stick with us and we'll run through them all in a second. So, first things first, you can actually view parts of that property with actually going there. If the property is listed in an agent's window or on Rightmove or wherever you find that property, if it's off market then maybe not, but sometimes you can ask the owner to send you pictures. So what you need to do before you even think that you need to go and look at this property, you need to address whether you should look at it or not. And you can get a real good indication from this by actually looking at the photos of the property, working through them in a methodical way and working out whether you think that property is going to need any work. For one, generally with me it will do, because we're looking stuff that we can add value to. And then you can go through those pictures and basically work out exactly how much you think that property will cost to get back up to standard, to be able to be rented out or to flip it and sell it on. And so the reason we do this is basically, the main reason, number one, is obviously as a property developer, a property investor, whatever you want to call yourself, if you're going to go and look at properties, there's a fair chance you could look at a fair few of those properties. There could be, you know, it could be 100 properties that you look at over the space of a month. So you need to kind of cut down on the time aspect, because the one thing that we've got that's ever decreasing is time. So if we can cut down, say, them properties to 25 or maybe 20, if we look through the photos and we can eliminate some, because yeah, we look at them and think, yeah, it needs way too much spending, or that property is not for me, there's not enough value to be added, or any other reason that you can think that you can determine whether or not you should go and look at that property, can save you time, and time's massive in this industry. So you've decided you're going to go and look at it, you've looked at all the photos, you think it's a nice property, you've looked at the demographics, so you know the area, you understand that it's going to get good capital appreciation, you've looked at what rental yield you should get, because obviously you should know this by now that we always work backwards. So we look at what end price the property is going to be at, what end valuation, what rental yield we're going to get, and we work backwards to give ourselves an offer price, and then obviously take into consideration the amount of work that's going to need doing, which is what this viewing is for. When you've actually arrived at that property that you've made an appointment for with an agent or with the vendor, if it's off market, if it's with an agent and you've arranged to get there, say at 9 o'clock, get there 10-15 minutes beforehand. I always do this because it gives me chance, especially if the property's empty and no one's living there. You can go have a walk around the outside of the property. You can, you know, if you're nosy, you can peer through the windows and you can see things without being interrupted by an agent talking to you. So I know that sounds a bit, nasty maybe, but yeah, sometimes you don't need distractions. So you'll be able to go and walk around, and even sitting in your car from the front, if you can't walk around the property, if you can just look at the face of the property, basically start from the top and work your way down. So sit in your car, look up at the ridge line of the roof, make sure that there's no bows in it, that there's no movement. Check the tiles, so check for any missing tiles, check for any slit tiles, any broken tiles. And then move over to the chimney if there is one. So check the flashing around the chimney, check the pointing, check if the chimney's been capped off, because when you get inside later, if the chimney has been capped off and it's not ventilated, there could be problems with damp. So yeah, and then obviously you can work your way down that property from the top, from the roof, then work down to the fascias and gutters, check for any leaking, check for any water stains down the brickwork. So obviously if you can see that there's leaking guttering and there's water stains down that brickwork, there's a fair chance when you go inside that property there'll be a damp patch in that area or close by. And then work your way down further, look at the windows, check for double glazing, check that they are internally beaded, because a lot of double glazing, you know, people say you need double glazing in a building, but what they don't realise is double glazing, especially PVC double glazing, has been around for years now, and some of the early units that were externally beaded that have something called security tape on the inside, one, they're not as efficient. The glass is generally a smaller thickness, so obviously you get less, you get a smaller U value, so the heat transfers through quicker, so you won't get as good EPC rating. And then the external beading, it's problematic for people like breaking into the property. Those beads can be flicked out quite easily. Work your way down, look, see if it needs a new front door, and then work your way down right to the bottom of the property, around the bottom. If it's rendered, check if the rendering's touching the floor, because if it is, that's a massive no-no, because the damp will come up the render and into the brickwork. It's called a damp breach. So, and then, yeah, obviously if you can get around the back, do exactly the same around the back, around the side, check the gable end, pointing, things like that, and then wait for your agent to arrive. And then when the agent arrives, start looking through the inside of the property. So when you actually get inside the property, obviously have a walk around with the agent, but don't be scared to ask the agent if you can have a bit of time. A lot of them want to rush you around, just have a quick look. You need to look at things quite specifically, and you need to look for certain things. Now, the three main things that you're looking for when you get inside is, one, the plumbing work, so the boiler, the pipe work, the radiators, things like that, and the water pressure. Two, the electrics, so you want to be looking at the consumer unit, you want to be looking at plug sockets, things like that. Lights, you know, things, if you got plug sockets down low on skirting boards, generally that's not good. And then the third thing, can't do three here, but yeah, the third thing is, if you can, try and get up into the loft and have a look at the roof from the inside to see if it's been, you know, refelted and battened, to see if it's old. If it's old and worn and it's basically bodging inside on the battens and all the bodgings fall out, there's a fair chance that roof's going to need replacing within the next year or two. So obviously they're the main things that you need to look at. So if we go through them in a bit more detail, so let's start with the plumbing. So obviously plumbing, first things first, and everybody, I would imagine everybody knows this, go and look at the boiler. You can generally tell if a boiler's old. If it looks old and worn and it's horrible brown colour and it's, you know, it just looks like it's had a hard life, there's a fair chance you're going to be replacing that boiler, so you need to take that into consideration. Then go and look at the radiators. Check that they're modern. If they're not, there's a fair chance you'll be replacing them. Check that they're convectors as well, you know, the ones with the little fins in the back. Check the size of the radiators, because a lot of the time radiators are way too small for the size of the property or the size of the room. If you can, have a look underneath the sink, check pipe work, things like that. Check the stop tap to see if it's lead and it's coming up, then obviously that's an old lead pipe. That could be an issue. A lot of people are getting those replaced now. And yeah, just generally go around and look at the plumbing. Switch the tap on, check the pressure of the actual water itself. If it's trickling out, there's an issue with the pressure somewhere. If it's absolutely bellowing out, that's not much of an issue because you can turn it down slightly. But yeah, just check everything around that plumbing. If you are unsure, and you know, obviously I'm a builder, I've been working in this industry for 30 years, I know what to look for. And if I don't know, what I do is I will always take a picture. Take as many pictures as you can of this property. If you can, take a camera and do a video. If you've got one, take a 3D video camera, which is one that I've shown you in one of my posts on Instagram. It's basically called a GoPro Max 360. They're not mega money, they're about £250, £300. You can walk around with it and it'll take a 360 image of the whole, everything that you see, so you can go back to that and look at that video. So the next thing, obviously the electrics, and the first place that we go to look at the electrics is the consumer unit. So people know it as a fuse board or whatever. If it is an old-fashioned fuse board and it's got fuses you can pull out, you need to take that into consideration, that it's going to need a new one, because basically they're not up to building regulations no more. If it looks fairly modern but it's made of plastic, that is now no longer up to regulations. All the new consumer units need to be metal cased, and they need to have certain size breakers in there. Some of them have to have zones, so you have, if you noticed on some of the modern consumer units, you have two main RCD breakers and a main one, so it's zoned into two, so it'll zone the house out. Sometimes you have upstairs and downstairs, sometimes you'll have bigger circuits like ring mains on one and then lighting on another. But check that consumer unit. If it is an old consumer unit, there's a fair chance that the wiring's old as well, so you could be in for a complete rewire. You can take socket fronts off and just have a look at the colours of the wires. If we've got modern twin and earth cable in there, that is brown and blue and not red and black like the old colours, then it's recently had a rewire. Not a lot of agents will want you taking socket fronts off and things like that though. So basically, if you can get to the consumer unit, you can generally see what cables are going into it, and if it looks like modern twin and earth, which is a grey colour, then generally that'll be quite modern. And then obviously go around switching on and off all the lights. Check that the light switches, because this is one I've had recently, check that when you switch a light switch on, that the corresponding light comes on. We've had one recently where we switched a landing light on and it didn't come on, another light come on somewhere else. So just check that, walk around. One thing you can get is, again, if you go to my Instagram, I've done a video on this, it's called a loop checker. It's basically a little box, mine's red, you can get them from Screwfix or whatever. It's just basically a little plug. You plug it into the plug and it'll test the loop circuit. It will test for the actual loop itself, the continuity, it'll check for earth bonding and things like that. Real good piece of kit, get yourself one and use it. And then that third thing is obviously the actual roof from the inside. So we've checked the outside, we've checked there's no falling tiles, no broken tiles, no ridge tiles come amiss and starting to slip. We've checked the chimney for flashing, we've checked it for pointing, we've checked that it's, whether it's been capped off or whether it's been, you know, it's actually a working flue. And obviously when we come inside, if you can get up the loft, you don't actually physically need to get up there, but even if you can just pop your head up, you know, most houses now have a loft ladder. If they don't, what I do is I take one of these little telescopic ladders that lift up, that you can basically take around. They come in a little bag, and I've got like a little kit. If you've heard me mention that, I've got that, I've got the loop tester, I've got my 3D camera. Take that, get yourself up in the loft, just pop your head up, get your phone camera, zoom around it, turn your light on so as you can see, and just check if all the bodging, which bodging is what they used to force in with a trowel in between the battens to actually act as like what felt works and does now. So if there's bodging and it's all fell out, there's a fair chance that roof's going to be needing to be renewed at some point. If you pop your head up there and it's nice breathable membrane or it's felt, then there's a fair chance you're going to get a fair few years out of that roof, so not too much to worry about. Obviously you can cast your eye over to the chimney as well when you look into the roof, where it forms into the chimney stack, and just look for pointing, things like that, look for any cracks, look for any movement, any twisting or anything like that. And then from there on, it's just a general walk around the house, going around the house, checking for things like patches where it looks like it's damp. If it is, a lot of people like to take a damp meter to just test whether the damp is within the bracket of where it should be. I don't like them because over the last 30 years, we have found out that damp meters basically lie. They don't tell the truth. So I don't tend to have one nowadays. We don't use them. You can generally tell if there's damp. You can see the colour of the plaster or the paintwork. You can see wallpaper falling off. In the worst case scenario, you can see mould growing. Obviously, if it's furnished, pull furniture away from the wall if you can. You don't have to come too far, just pull the sofa away, have a look down the back, because the less air movement, the more chance you've got of mould growing and damp being caused. But it's a different kind of damp to what we get from rising damp. So, but just check that. And then obviously work your way around the house, check the windows, check that they open and close, check that they're all sealed and there's no big drafts coming in. And then, yeah, just a general walk around really, checking, you know, doors closed, checking architraves are fixed correctly, checking that skirting boards there and present, because we've been in houses before that have actually had no skirting board, but there's been so much furniture around the room you can't actually see that it's missing. And then one of the last things we like to do is I'll always take a measuring device. If you've only got a tape measure, that's fine, use a tape measure. We have one of these laser measuring devices. Again, we've done a little video on Instagram showing this. It's basically a little DeWalt one. You can get them from Screwfix, do about 30 quid, something like that. And basically it's got a laser on it. You point the laser, you press the button and it'll give you a measurement. So you can go around each room and get room sizes. Generally, if you're buying through an agent, they will have a floor plan as part of their, you know, as part of their pack, part of the pictures that come out to you that you've looked at already before. I generally try and print that floor plan out, and then it gives me something to write on, to write the measurements. And then when we get back, after we've viewed this property, it allows me to know areas of floors, it allows me to know areas of the walls, so that I can work out things like flooring, I can work out things like plastering, I can work out how much paint I'm going to use, how much wallpaper if you're going to use wallpaper. And then obviously from there, what we will do then is we will always go to the two most important rooms in that house. One being the kitchen and two being the bathroom. Those are the places where if you're going to add value to your property, those are the rooms which will add the most value. Bar adding an extension or adding another bedroom or going up into the loft and doing a loft conversion, replacing the kitchen or making the kitchen look better, doing it up, tarting up, whatever you want to do with it, and replacing the bathroom, putting a new bathroom in or making it nicer, you know, just whatever, fitting a shower if there's no shower. Those are the places, the two places where you're going to add the most value. So walk around them, work out, does it need a new kitchen? Does it need a new bathroom? Can I get away with just replacing the doors and the worktops? Are the carcasses okay? Is the bath generally fine? Does it need just a new bath panel and maybe fitting a vanity unit to give it a bit more of a prestige look? Things like that. Work out in your own mind before you come away from that property what you think is going to add the most value. And obviously, I can't emphasize this enough, take as many pictures as you can, take as many videos as you can, because if there's something that you're not sure of, the last thing you want to be doing is going back to look at that property, which uses more of your valuable time. If you've got pictures and videos to look at as reference, they're dead easy to just get your phone up or your camera or whatever you're using, just have a quick look through. And if it's something that you don't know, if it's a question like, how much is this new kitchen going to cost me? If you've got a picture of the kitchen, if you've got a video of the kitchen, it's quite easy to go to someone who does know, whether you go to a local branch of Howdens or you go to your local builder. You can even come to me, give me a message, I'll gladly help you. I can give out information freely, you know, I'm not charging for that kind of thing. So if I can help someone, I will do. But yeah, it's kind of, if there's something that you don't understand, if you've got some kind of reference towards it, a picture, and you've got sizes of that room as well, because you've written them down, then it's quite easy to actually go to someone else and find out the answer to that, you know, that question that you're asking yourself. And then when you've actually finished that viewing and you've gone through all these things that I've just told you, what is a good actual shout actually is all these things, put them in a spreadsheet, put them on a tick list. Obviously I know a lot of people that use a tick list. They'll go through each room, tick off each room, everything that they're going to look at, which is everything that I've told you, and they'll work their way through like that. Obviously I've been doing this for 30 years. It's kind of second nature to me. I can look at a building and pretty much tell you to the closest 50 quid how much that's going to cost to refurbish. But yeah, obviously try and go around with some kind of list, with some kind of agenda. Don't just go there without any plan. Go there clued up with a list, with your camera, with your loop tester, with your measuring device, you know, and work through it methodically. But after that actual viewing is finished, wait for that agent to drive off, wave them away, you know, wave the vendor away if they're going, and then be a little bit sneaky. Go and knock on the neighbour's door. Go and speak to, if there's someone stood at the bus stop, if there's a local shop, go and have a chat with them. Speak to the neighbours and speak to them about what the area's like. You know, if one of them comes to you and you know, as you're speaking to them and said, just be careful next door, but two's a drug den, or you know, or something's going on dodgy up the road. Because we have had properties in the past where we've looked at them. I've actually been to look at jobs for customers, and there's been like nasty people in that street. You know, I've been to one once and there was a brothel up the road and it actually scared me. So yeah, just go speak to the neighbours and actually find out what's going on, because the last thing you want to do is put a bid in for that property, end up buying it, spending a fortune on the refurbishment, getting it, you know, valued, getting your money back, and then finding out no one wants to rent it because the local drug dealer lives next door but one, or there's a kid that's just come out of jail that's absolutely going around the whole of the town wrecking things, or you know, whatever. It's you know, I'm trying not to but generalise and to pigeonhole people and things like that in areas, but obviously things like that are not good for property investors to actually, you know, add value to the property. So try and look at that, speak to the neighbours, speak to the locals, and get an essence of what the demographic of the people that live in that area are. So that's kind of it really, folks. There's probably things that I've missed because going and viewing a property, it's quite in depth. Obviously you're going to be purchasing, you know, it's quite a sizable purchase, you know, paying 100 grand or, you know, even 50, 60 grand for something is a lot of money. You don't want to do this viewing half-heartedly. You want to make sure you're buying the right property. So you've got to do your due diligence. You've got to make sure it's in the right area. You've got to make sure that the property needs the work that you're thinking it's going to need. And then obviously try and have some contingency as well, because even me, you know, I've been in this industry for 30 years, looking at properties, looking at, you know, what is consistent within a refurbishment, what's going to be needed, how much it's going to cost. But even I miss things. One of the properties that we have just bought, we basically looked round it, we've got the refurbishment pretty much down to the penny. But then when we got in there, we lifted back the carpets, which we couldn't have done when we were reviewing it. You know, the agent wouldn't have been messed happy if we'd have started ripping the carpets up. But when we ripped those carpets up, we found that a couple of the floorboards were rotten. And then when we took them floorboards up, we found that a couple of the joists were rotten as well, because it was breaching through the outside because someone had put the patio too high above the damp-proof course. So obviously that was a cost that we didn't envisage. Obviously, to us, it wasn't massive because we got things like that lying around our yard that we could basically patch up and get it sorted. For someone who's got to get a builder in, that could have been, I don't know, could have been a 1,200–1,500 quid, you know, add on to your refurbishment costs. So that's the last thing you want. You know, you only want 2 or 3 things like that to go wrong, and you're not making as much money or not making any money anymore. So make sure you've got some contingency within that. whether it's with your purchase price, whether you buy it slightly lower, or make sure that you've got a bit of extra money put aside for things that you've not seen. So that's basically it, folks. So yeah, we've done our walk around, we've looked at this property, we've done all the things that we need to do. We're going to come away and we now know how much we're going to offer. So I hope that helped you, and I hope you got value from that, folks. If you'd like to drop down below and give us a little like, a thumbs up, and then obviously if you're not subscribed to this channel, get what you're doing, get down there and subscribe, because there's plenty more information like this. Obviously we are a building company as well, so there's quite a few building videos that we do, tips and tricks on how you can refurb your property, little bits and bobs like that. So yeah, if you wouldn't mind, folks, like, subscribe, and I'll see you later, folks.